stage. Oh, did it? Please don't take me connected to that. No, I don't want that to happen. Let me check my Bluetooth right quick. Oh my goodness. Never ending story. All right, let's get away here. Media assets. Turn this music on. Turn it down real low. Okay, there we go. All right. Well, I guess we're live. Why am I so tiny? I need to fix that. Let's see if we can fix it right here. There we go. I guess that's a little better. We'll just make the little round circle. Anyway, so I guess I'm live. How's everybody doing? Today I'm going to read chapter 2, maybe chapter 3 out of her book. But I also want to talk about some of the new trending, the high profile trending cases that are just making us all sick, just making us all sick. It's crazy, I just watched something about Decker. He's still not found. Why? I mean, is he alive? I don't know if he's alive or not, but how can he hide so well? He has no money. What's he doing? Kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Where is he at? But also, look at Jack and Lily. We're still nothing. It's just like crickets. It's almost like Sebastian Rogers' case. Just nothing, right? And then there's the little Haro baby. Where is he at? I don't understand. They know where that baby is, but they can't tell where that baby is because once they do that, well, then they're guilty as it is right now. They've got nothing but a bunch of evidence they found in the house, and that's it. So, I just don't really know. It's crazy. I heard about another case yesterday where a 12-year-old boy, something happened to him, and his mother is now being looked at, and that's really sad. Let me turn my Bluetooth. Let me turn this on over here. So I want it to connect here instead of over there. Oh my goodness. I just wished. How can so many things happen to so many little kids? I don't get it. I don't understand it. Let me turn this on over here. Let me fix myself so I can make sure that this music is not playing too loud in the background because, that's always an issue. So here we go. Let's see. All right. Let me get myself going here. I put something on last night that was pretty interesting. I was talking about Colby Ryan's reaction to his mother's phone call, the final phone call we had with her, and how disturbing that was, and how she was immediately victim blaming and all that. I just feel so bad for him over that. What in the hell is wrong with her? I mean, we know she has all these weird things, but what else? How do you go from almost like a normal, I'm going to say normal mother, but that might not really be right because we don't know if she was ever really a normal mother, do we? So let me go to my channel down here and see, where am I at? Oh, right here. Silly me. I want to make sure I can hear it okay before I do anything else. Okay, yeah, I can hear. And it's not loud. The music is not overplaying. Okay, good. Anyway. So I just don't. I found, and there's like all kinds of other cases out there of like, teenagers who's taken the lives of their newborn babies. I mean, that kind of stuff. It's terrible. So many terrible things out there. Just nasty, just terrible. But anyway, now we're going to go back and start reading our chapter 2 of this book that I enjoy this author. Arthur. She's not an Arthur. She's an author. She's pretty good. She is pretty good. So anyway, I'm going to read this. I'm going to read chapter 2. Maybe we'll do 2 and 3 today. But and I know this channel is not for everyone, and that's okay too. But I hope you enjoy what I'm offering today. I'm still not even monetized, but really that makes no difference to me. I'm just here because I enjoy hanging out with my friends and maybe trying to offer somebody a little something that they didn't have. Like if you're driving home from work or whatever and you need something to listen to that's not the same old thing, well, here we go. All right, so let's go to chapter 2. There are a few things my father loves more than a chocolate layer cake. When he was a boy in Mississippi, my grandparents' housekeeper, Layla, her name was Layla May, used to make him one from the scratch every week to get a chocolate cake made. When we'd visit for Christmas, I was mesmerized by the smell of those cakes. and by Layla May in her white uniform and apron, towering in the doorway of the kitchen, guarding the entrance as if it was her own place. Okay. Now, I guess I need to speak up right. Now, the thing about this person and that wrote this book, she grew up in a very affluent and wealthy family, and it's probably a lifestyle that most of us have probably never seen as children. So, just know that ahead of time as I read along. Okay. My mother was also from the South, born and raised in Virginia. She understood the importance of ritual and placed tremendous value on Southern-style housekeeping. As soon as she learned about the cakes, she adopted the tradition as her own. I used to watch her on our dining room table in San Francisco, slicing up each layer into identical halves. By tying sewing thread, she would tie sewing thread around a. Okay, this is kind of funny. Okay, she would. Oh boy, this is strange. Okay, so about putting sewing string around this cake and then pulling it down to kind of make the cuts. I guess that would keep it from tearing the knife. You know, like sometimes you cut a cake and the knife tears it up. So I guess I could see where that would make some sense, I guess. But anyway, because I used to watch her from the dining room table in San Francisco, slicing up each layer into identical halves by tying sewing thread around them and pulling the ends through the center into a knot. This way it's perfectly even. I loved hanging out with her in the room. I would lie under the table and read books while she cut and iced the cakes. Over time, it just became something like a confessional. I would tell her about all the stuff going on at school and admit to any behavior I thought might be questionable. She'd let me know if my actions or reactions were out of line and explain how to make things right. Since my judgment wasn't exactly dependable, Mom and I found it best for me to run things by her first. Did you thank the Patels for the sugar? She asked. Mom had sent me to the neighbor's house with a measuring cup earlier that morning. No, they weren't home, I said. Mom stopped mid-slice to look at me. Then how did you get the sugar? She asked. Out of the container. I know the Patels weren't home, and as soon as I reached the driveway, for some reason they refused to use the garage. So as if it were home. Oh gosh, this is crazy. I gotta get comfortable here. This little girl's bad. I'm telling y'all, she's bad. Okay. So I knew the Patels weren't home as soon as I reached their driveway. For some reason, they refused to use the garage. So if they were home, their pea green station wagon would have always been there. But that day, it wasn't. Confident the sliding glass door would be unlocked, I went into the side of the house and gave it a tug. It slid open, as I knew it would, and I stepped inside and helped myself to the sugar container. It was on the counter, stopping on the way to play with her dog, Moses. I know you said we couldn't, but can we please get a dog? I continued. It could play with Moses if it got bored. Mom stared at me, just horrified. If the Patels weren't home when you went to their house, she asked slowly, then how did you get inside? I recounted my expedition to Mom. Well, when I finished, she buried her face in her hands. No, honey, she said, finally looking up. No, you can't just go inside someone's house if they aren't home. I was confused. Why not? Well, they wouldn't care. We go over there all the time. It's fine as long as you don't take anything. But you did take something, she said, clearly upset. You took the sugar. Now, I was really confused. But you told me to take the sugar. Mom exhaled sharply. I told you to ask them for sugar, not just go over and help yourself without permission. You are not to do that, anything like that again. That is very, very wrong. Do you understand me? Yes, I lied. She lied to her mother right then. Because I didn't understand. I assumed that asking the Patels for the sugar was a formality. They didn't care. I'd saved them the hassle of having to answer the door and make small talk. Wow. This child is something else. Okay, turn my page over here. Who wanted to do that? I knew I didn't, but I also knew I couldn't explain any of this to my mom. She was big on honesty. When in doubt, tell the truth. She liked to say that. The truth helps people understand, only I wasn't sure I agreed. As a child, I lived in a constant state of doubt. I had doubts about the way I was supposed to feel, the way because I didn't feel. Doubts about the things that I did, doubts about the things I wanted to do. Telling the truth about those uncertainties sounded like a good idea in theory, but in practice, I found it often made things worse. I could never tell what information was going to cause a negative reaction. It seemed like I was constantly oscillating between the poles of honesty and dishonesty, and I never knew where I would land. This was particularly true when it came to my mom. Arguing with her is just never something I wanted to risk. She was so emotional, and I trusted her to guide me. With my mom on my side, I didn't have to worry about feeling or non-feeling or choosing right from wrong. But when she was angry, I felt like I was on my own. And back then, on my own wasn't a safe place to be. My mom sighed again and tied a new piece of thread around another layer of cake. Bottom line, we can't only go to the hotels when they're home. And no, it's not okay, even if you don't take anything. I nodded and decided against confessing to all the trips I'd made to their house, whenever. Whenever my mom left my sister and me alone with a nanny. Since this was technically a new rule, I didn't see any reason to apply it retroactively. Okay. Mom looked as if she was about to say something else, but she was interrupted by stomping of my father's feet onto the stairs. We heard the kitchen cabinets opening and closing before the door into the dining room swung open, and he rushed inside. Has anyone seen my briefcase? He asked. He strode past us and just stared, searching in the living room. I heard him stifle a sniffle and wondered if he might be getting a cold. I hope not. We were supposed to go ice skating that night. Since that Blondie embargo, I'd become obsessed with Ice Castle, a movie about a blind ice skater. I was excited to try some of the moves I'd been practicing, blindfolded in socks and on our hardwood floors and actually skating rinks. But Dad, coming down with a cold, would put a serious damper on going to the rink. It's upstairs in your office. Mom told him, but why do you need it? Dinner's almost ready and it's Saturday. We're taking the girls skating. There was an edge to her voice. Dad looked up and put his hands over his face. Oh, honey, I forgot. He said, walking over to her, Bruce called and I needed to run to the studio. My father was a rising star in the music industry, a business that often required long and unorthodox work hours. Dad looked at me. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Then he asked Mom, can we just do it another night? Mom looked out the window, not saying a word. I thought it was an odd response, but Dad didn't seem to notice. Instead, he headed for the door, yelling over his shoulder, I'll make it up to you next week. Mom sat still for a moment. Then she got up and walked into the kitchen, leaving the cake partially iced on the table. I followed behind her. I was unsure of what to do. In the kitchen, she stood at the sink and stared into space. Early evening light poured through the sliding doors and into the family room. Years later, Mom would tell me that she hated this time of day and that our time in San Francisco is when she hated. Our time in San Francisco is when hatred started. Okay. But I never shared that perspective. To me, the arrival of twilight has always been magical and overturned to darkness. On that day in particular, I remembered how beautiful my mom looked as the light bounced off the countertops and onto her face. I came up behind her and gave her a hug. I didn't know what to say. Things continued this way for a while. Dad was almost never home before midnight, and my interactions with him were reduced to just brief kisses in the car before school or an occasional outing on the weekends. Not that I cared much. In fact, it was almost nice. I loved having my mom and sister all to myself. Oh my gosh, I could imagine if my kids did some of the things this little girl's talking about, I love having a sister, period. I've heard that parents worry about jealousy and sibling rivalry, but those things just were never a problem for us. I didn't like being the center of attention anyway. Once my sister arrived, I had someone to share the focus, and I liked having a buddy who appreciated any penchant for mischief. One-sided rule breaking was typically at the forefront of any interaction between us, as it remains today. Harlow would hand me a cup. I would throw it down the center of the I would throw it down the center of the stairwell. Paula would go get it in the tub and golly, she's bad. Paula would get it in the tub and just point to the bubble bath. Uh-oh. I would empty the bottle and turn on the jacuzzi jets. Every action caused a hysterical reaction. Mom loved it. But the frenzied sound of Harlow's laughter didn't always resonate with my dad. What are you guys doing? He asked us one day, walking into the room unexpectedly. He usually liked to play with us, but it seemed likely he only wanted to sleep when he was at home, which wasn't often. Dad had started to spend more and more time at work, and after a while my mother became depressed. Some days she'd burst into tears over the tiniest of things. Other times she'd be angry and snap at us for reasons I didn't understand. I was anxious, confused, and for the first time unable to rely on my mother for guidance. It had been a week since she'd made one of those cakes, and in no time seemed good to talk. She was just, her mother was depressed, okay? I wonder, now I don't know this because I have not read ahead, but I wonder if her parents ended up divorced or something, okay? All right, let's go back over here. Can you imagine a full bottle of bubble bath and a jacuzzi tub? What would happen? Yes, I can tell you what happens. The bubbles go all over the bathroom, and it's a big old mess to clean up. And like as the water settles and gets in those jets, you will have bubbles remaining there for a little while. Okay. All right, where were we? So her mother's depressed. Some days she'd just burst into tears over the tiniest of things. Other times she'd be angry and snap at us for reasons I didn't understand. I was anxious and confused, and for the first time unable to rely on my mother for guidance. It had been weeks since she'd made one of those cakes, and no time seemed a good time to talk to her about the stuff I'd been doing, like stealing. I'd been taking backpacks from school. I didn't even want them, and I always eventually returned them. It was more of a compulsion, something I did to ease tension. When I saw it was unattended backpacks, I just took it. It didn't matter where it was or whose it was. I was taking it. That's all that mattered. Doing anything I knew wasn't right was how I released my pressure, how I gave myself a jolt to the counter. Wait a minute. She goes, doing anything I knew wasn't right. That's how I released the pressure, how I gave myself a jolt to the counter my apathy. After a while, though it stopped working, regardless of how many bags I took, I could no longer generate that jolt. I felt nothing. And the nothingness I'd started to notice made my urge to do bad things more extreme. It was a lot like last time I'd ever say Sid. It was like the last time I ever saw Sid. We were standing on the sidewalk and waiting to go into the school, and when he started to get on my nerves. I'm sorry, this is a little girl. Hang on, guys. I believe this is a little girl that she stabbed, but I'm not sure. So let me just finish. We'll just go back over here. So she's on the sidewalk waiting to go into school. When she started to get on my nerves, she'd wanted to spend the night at our house, only she wasn't allowed. It's all your fault, she whined. If you hadn't played that stupid trick on us, we could still come over and I could play with you with your toys. You're always ruin everything. Sorry, I said. Even though I wasn't. I was glad she wasn't allowed to visit. My head was hurting. The pressure had been steadily increasing, yet nothing I did seemed to help. I was emotionally disconnected, but also stressed and somewhat disoriented. It was like I was losing my mind and I just wanted to be alone. Abruptly, Sid kicked my backpack from where it sat by my feet, knocking everything to the ground. You know what, she said. I don't care. Your house sucks, and so do you. Sounds like a little child, doesn't it? The tantrum was meaningless, something she had done to get my attention, like countless times before. But she'd picked the wrong day to start a fight. Looking at Sid, I knew that I never wanted to see her again. I figured this message should have been clear after I locked her outside of the house in the dead of the night. Remember, she got in trouble for this in chapter 1. All right. But eventually, I needed to send a more direct message. She makes me laugh. Without a word, I leaned down to collect my things. We carried pencil boxes back then. Mine was pink with the Hello Kitty characters. and full of sharpened yellow number twos. I grabbed one, stood up, and jammed it into the side of her head. The pencil splintered, and part of it lodged in her neck. Sid started screaming to the other kids. Understandably, she lost it. Meanwhile, I was in a daze. The pressure was gone, but unlike every other time I'd done something bad, my physical attack on Sid had resulted in something different, a sort of a euphoria. I've heard people say that before. Criminals talk about, well, they got a rush out of it. Whatever they were doing that was a criminal act, they'd get a rush out of it. So I'm gonna think that because a lot of them are psychopaths or sociopaths or have those type of narcissistic behaviors. But anyway, all right. Oh my goodness, she is bad. Whew. I walked away from this scene blissfully at ease. For weeks I'd been engaging in all manner of subversive behavior to make the pressure disappear, and none of it had worked. But now, with one violent act, all traces of pressure were eradicated. Not just gone, but replaced by a deep sense of peace. It was like I discovered a fast track to, hang on, I gotta turn the page. Wow. Like I discovered a fast track to tranquility. One that was equal parts efficiency and madness. None of it made sense, but I didn't care. I wandered around the stupor for a while. She walked around in a stupor for a while. And then I went home and just calmly told my mom what had happened. So imagine going home and saying, Mom, I just stabbed a girl in the neck with a pencil. Oh my God. What the hell was going through your mind? Her mother said. My father wanted to know. I was sitting at the foot of my bed later that night. Both my parents stood before me, demanding answers, but I didn't have any. Nothing, I said. I don't know. I just did it. And you're not sorry? Dad was so frustrated and irritable. He'd just returned from another work trip, and they'd been fighting. Yeah, I said, I was sorry, I explained. I'd even already written Sid an apology letter, so why is everyone still so mad? Because you're not sorry, Mom said quietly. Not really, not in your heart. Then she looked at me as if I was a stranger. It just paralyzed me, that look. It was the same expressions I'd seen on Ava's face the day we played house. It was a look of hazy recognition, as if to say, there's something off about you. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I can feel it. My stomach just launched as though it had been punched. I hated the way my mother stared at me like that. She'd never done it before, and I just wanted her to stop. Seeing her look at me that way was like being observed by someone who didn't know at all. She didn't know her at all. It hadn't helped anyone. If anything, it had made everyone more confused, including me. Anxious to make things right, I stood up and I tried to hug her, but she lifted her hand to stop me. Nope, she put her hand up. Talk to the hand, little girl. I bet you that's what she's thinking. No, she said, no. She stared at me long and hard once more, and then she left. I watched as Dad followed her out of my room, their frames becoming smaller as they descended down that staircase. I crawled into my bed, and I wished I had someone I could hurt. I wished I had someone I could hurt. That's what she's saying right here. Okay. Boy. So I could feel the way I did after stabbing Sid. Settling for myself, I squeezed a pillow to my chest, digging my nails into my forearm. Uh-oh. I hope she didn't become a cutter. Some of these, I always wonder if people who, cut themselves or whatever, if that's some kind of a release too. I think it is, but I don't really know anything about those people. Anyway. Be sorry, I hissed. I continued to claw my skin and clench my jaw, wielding remorse with all my might. I can't remember how long I tried, only that I was desperate and furious once I finally gave up. Exhausted, I collapsed back into the bed. I looked at my arm and it was bleeding. After the Sid incident, Mom withdrew from everyone. For weeks, she hardly came out of her room, and when she did, she always seemed sad. Nanny Lee was mostly in charge then. I loved Nanny Lee. She was kind and gentle and always read books to us after we should have been asleep. But what I really needed was my mother. The euphoria I had felt after stabbing Sid was both disconcerting and tempting. I wanted to experience it again, I wanted to hurt again, only I didn't want to. I was confused, scared, and I needed my mom to help me. I wasn't sure how things had gone so wrong. I just knew it was all my fault, and I had to find a way to make it better. I'd been upstairs in my room contemplating this one day when I caught a whiff of a familiar smell. It was a chocolate cake. She must have just taken the layers out of the oven. This meant that she would soon put them in the freezer to cool before transferring them into the dining room for the slicing and the icing. And in the instant, I knew just what to do. The box inside my closet had once again became full. Okay, so in chapter 1, remember, she would go steal things, put it in this box in her closet. Her mother would find this box, and they would have to go return everything where it came from. If she knew where she got it, if she could remember where she got it, right? Okay. So just a little something. I'm just trying to explain to you why she has to get this box. Okay. She must have taken. Okay, let me go back over here. The box inside my chest. The box inside my closet had once again grown full. Books, candy from the grocery store, albums from my father's office, coffee mugs from the teacher's lounge, and a pair of shoes of all sorts of things. I lifted to release some tension. I pulled the box from its hiding place and set it up on top of my dresser. This was how I could make up to my mom. If she was making cakes again, it must have meant she was feeling better. I would tell her all about all the stuff I'd done, and she would help me make it right. She would give me a big hug and call me her honest girl. My mental box would be empty, and I could have a clean space to work with. The pressure, the doubt, the stress, the desire to hurt, all of it would go away the second I confessed. I'd sit on the floor next to the. Sorry, guys, turn the page. Oh boy, this little girl. I'd sit on the floor next to the table and practice my apology speeches while she finishes the cakes. Only this time, I would try to really mean them. She would be so proud of me. I made my way down the stairs quietly, dragging the box behind me. It took some time, but I finally made it to the ground floor to where I could peer into the dining room without being seen. The smell of that chocolate cake was so strong and sweet, just like my mom. I tightened my grip on the box as I leaned around the corner. I already had a vision in my head of, what I would see. Mom in her peach dress and flats, putting the final touches of icing around the first layer of the cake. I was so positive about this vision that I gasped when I caught the sight of her. She was sitting at the table, slightly sobbing. All the lights were off, her hands were shaking, and the thread was limp, and she was half-heartedly attempting to slice through the layers of cake. The table was littered with remnants of previous slices, all uneven and tossed to the sides. How long had she been sitting there? I'll never know. Her face was blotchy, her apron was wet with tears. She was hyperventilating, and her head making that tiny jerking movement with each sharp breath. I jumped back behind the corner and froze, not sure what to do next. I'd never seen her like this before. Her sadness seemed to just consume her. From the living room, I could hear a stifled scream as yet another layer of cake just bit the dust. Then I heard the door open and knew she had left the dining room. I looked down at my box and I knew it needed to disappear. The sound of the mixer erupted the sound of the mixer erupted in the kitchen as my mom began to make another cake. I bent down and cautiously picked up the box. Then I made my way back up the stairs into my room. Stopping at the landing of my parents' bedroom, I opened the doors and she opens the doors. Where is she going to go in there? Okay. She's opening the doors to her parents' bedroom. She goes, I'm opening the double doors, and went to the wooden chest at the foot of their bed. Okay, she went to her mother's hope chest. That's what it was. This chest at the end of the bed. It's a hope chest. Okay. This, I knew, was my mother's hiding place. It only took me a few seconds to find parallel lines hidden inside a blanket. I shoved the record under my arm and walked upstairs to my room, kicking the door open gently with my foot. I didn't bother with the headphones this time. When I turned on my record player, my mom was too distracted to notice anything I was doing. Okay, her mother had taken these records away from her in chapter 1 because she was always doing something, and she thought that the Blondie records must have been a bad influence on her. So her mother took these records and hid them. She's done this once before, but then the little girl goes out to the trash and gets them out of the trash. Okay. So her mother just hides them in her hope chest the next time. It's like being invisible, I thought. The sound of Debbie Harry filled the room as I pushed the box back into the closet. 2 days later, I got rid of it, dumping the contents into a garbage can in front of Sid's house. Then I walked back home without a shred of remorse. Okay, now this is chapter 3. And I think they're taking a trip here. It's called Florida. Eyes down, gentlemen, shouted the guard. Look up here and you'll find yourself in the hole. I held my sister's hand tightly. We were walking through a cell-linked corridor in the nearby state prison at 10:30 on a school night. A few feet ahead, my mother was chatting with our Uncle Gilbert, the chief guard. Several officers had walked alongside and behind our group as we made our way toward the center tower. Oh, I guess she went on a trip. She's getting to see the prison, so she's walking through the prison. Okay, it's a little field trip they're having. This is what we call honor block, said Uncle Gilbert. The prisoners here have demonstrated good behavior, so they're allowed to roam around in this section of the prison. The doors on their cells aren't always locked like the others. I knew what others meant. In the hour or so we spent inside the prison, my sister, my mother, and I had been given a full tour of the facility and all male inhabitants, including the dangerous offenders section where the inmates were confined in an interior room behind the thick glass walls. Uncle Gilbert didn't want us standing near the glass because lots of them had been arrested for violent crimes. He didn't specifically explain why, but his tone reminded me of when Dad would insist on covering our eyes during sexy parts of movies. Okay. But if you're curious, he said, I'll let you look at them through the glass or on the TV next door. The one-way mirror allowed for an up-close and personal perspective. However, the camera gave me a bird's eye view, which I preferred. An officer named Bobby sat behind an officer sat behind a bank of monitors and showed me how to use the system. I scanned the room, panning and zoning for a good look at each inmate. What they had done to get locked up, she asked what had they done to get locked up like this. I knew it had to be something bad, but what? I asked Bobby. He goes, rape, murder, arson, that sort of stuff, he responded. Uncle Gilbert cleared his throat. It was a signal that Bobby needed to tread more carefully. Bobby gave him a quick nod and leaning forward to look me in the eye. Here's the thing, he said, gesturing to the men. These guys have all done some messed up stuff, but it isn't just what they did. It's that they ain't sorry about it. Okay, so she actually puts that word in here. It's because they ain't sorry about it. They weren't scared to do it to begin with. That's why they're in here. Oh, I said, though, I still didn't get it. The men in this prison, Bobby added, I'd say 80% of them are sociopaths. There's that word. There's our triggering word. Okay. It was the first time I'd heard that word. Oh, I said again, what's a sociopath? Somebody who doesn't feel bad about what they do. Bobby says no shame, doesn't care, they don't scare easy, they never feel guilty, and someone who isn't afraid of getting caught and does the same stupid stuff over and over. Huh, I said, looking at the men. Really? Bobby paused here. He said, taking out his wallet and laying it on the desk. Let's say I went outside for a few minutes and I left my wallet behind. I nodded, just engrossed. Mm-hmm. Would you go through it? Would you take anything out of it while I was gone? No. Of course she lied because she too would have taken something out of it. Bobby laughed. Nah, of course you wouldn't. And if you did take something out of it, I bet you'd feel pretty bad about it, right? So bad, I replied. Right, said Bobby. That's because you aren't a sociopath. A sociopath would take my wallet. Not only that, but he wouldn't feel bad about it. He'd probably just come back next week and do it again. He wouldn't be able to help himself because sociopaths aren't afraid of the consequences. I swallowed hard. Did this mean there was a ward for someone like me? Somehow I understood that a graveyard shift of a corrections officer was not the best person to ask. Bobby leaned forward to press a button, then he barked over the intercom. Rogers, hands off that glass. One of the inmates had backed away from the one-way mirror, just shaking his head and smiling at the camera. The guy loves to bust our chops, he says. I used this camera to zoom in on the Rogers. Officer Bobby, I asked, do all sociopaths end up in jail? Probably, said Bobby, unless they're really smart. I stared at the men behind the glass, all of them living together in a cage. What if they get into a big fight and kill each other? I asked. Then they will have paid their debt to society, he responded with a satisfied sigh. I wasn't sure what he meant, but I nodded and just looked back at the screen. Patrick, called my mother. Wrap it up, sweetheart. Your sister needs to use the bathroom. Mom had come up with the idea to visit the prison a few months earlier. Uncle Gilbert, who worked there in the night of the week, Uncle Gilbert, who worked the night shift during the week, was always telling stories about the Florida Department of Corrections and how it had piqued our interest. Boy. Imagine he's telling her what she is, and she was just a child, but she didn't know back then, right? And she grows up and actually gets diagnosed as a sociopath. That's just a little bit wild. She was 11 years old. All right. So after we left the control room, we were each offered a lockup experience in solitary and then given a tour of the honor block. As we walked up the stairs to the central tower, I gazed at the inmates below. There had to be hundreds of men there. That's the only thing separating them from us were 5 middle-aged guards. Positively blew my mind. But then I was 11 years old, and we'd been living in Florida for 2 years. Okay, so they moved from San Francisco to Florida. All right. Pack a bag, Mom had said. Shortly after the stabbing incident, we're going to visit Grandma for the weekend. Now, see, what's strange about this is she was in San Francisco when she does the stabbing incident. Then they had moved to Florida, I guess. It's kind of weird how she goes from this incident at the prison to going to see Grandma. Because she's saying shortly after the stabbing incident. We're going to visit Grandma for the weekend. This is how my mother informed us that she was leaving my father and moving us to, okay, now I get it. She was leaving the dad and moving them to Florida. Okay. Not knowing any better, I packed for the weekend. Things in Florida were weird for the start. For one thing, my mother refused to admit that she left my father and that we were now permanent residents of the Sunshine State. This remained the case even after Dad shipped the car along with the rest of her things. So she could start over. She could start looking for a new home. Mom, I realized I didn't always tell the truth, and it was frustrating. I may as well just lie. I mean, I thought that more than once, since I got into trouble either way. Oh boy, poor child. After a while, my mom seemed to grasp that her decision to prolong our family's vacation was not sitting well with my sister and me. To compensate for some of her guilt, she released a few of her other steadfast rules. She even let me have my first pet, a ferret named Baby. I adored Baby. Other than my sister, she was the only real companion, a fierce one at that. Baby was a rambunctious rascal with an enduring personality and a penchant for shiny objects. Okay, so I can see why she would like a ferret, because the ferret likes shiny objects. She does. Ferrets and squirrels and things like that, they steal things all the time. I have a funny story about a raccoon. So I'm going to stop right there for a second. When I was a child, my family had a raccoon. Now, when I was a child also, I was very, very small. Okay, so in the houses they used to build back then, they would have towel racks and things and be a little higher up than they are today in the bathrooms. And so here I was just this little tiny girl, and I remember the rack in there. I thought, I could just swing on it, right? So I grabbed it and I was going to swing on it. It comes out of the wall, of course, breaks the tile. But anyway, it was not fixed. So this little raccoon that we had would go and grab things and put them down that hole. And we would have to fish him out with a clothes hanger, just open the clothes hanger, make them fish him out. One day, my dad was getting ready to go somewhere. And he says, "Where are the car keys? Where are the car keys?" Because back then you didn't only have two cars; you just had one. So we were looking everywhere for these car keys. Well, that raccoon had stolen those car keys and put them down that hole. So that's the only reason why we found the car keys. That raccoon was so funny. It didn't really like my dad. So my dad would be just laying in the bed asleep. And if that raccoon was not in her little cage, she would go over there and bite my dad's toe. She was a funny little thing. I mean, raccoons, people keep them as pets a lot, but really you shouldn't, you really shouldn't. Anyway, we get back to our book over here. It's a funny story about that. Okay, now let's see. Back to where we were. Okay. Woo. She goes, okay. She even let me have her first pet, the ferret. I adored Baby. Other than my sister, she was the only real companion, a fierce one at that. Baby was a rambunctious rascal with enduring personality and a penchant for shiny objects. She was a natural-born thief. Indeed, she would often prowl my grandmother's house at night in search of jewelry, earrings, necklaces, anything that she could wrap her jaws around, then drag it back to the tiny bedroom and share it with my sister and I. Oh, God, Lord. Oh, that's too funny. And anyway, so she keeps these things. The little ferret would put these things under her bed. Okay. Every morning, just like Christmas, I'd wake up and drop to the floor to inspect what my four-legged Santa had brought. The things I liked, I kept for myself. The things I didn't like, I would just leave them there. "Good night, Baby," I said one morning, holding up a dangly gold earring. I gave the ferret a kiss and then buried my nose in her neck and just inhaled deeply. I'd been told that ferrets were unpopular pets because of their odor, but I loved the way Baby smelled. Her earthy scent was just reminding me of books in the public library. Baby gnawed at my hair, signaling she wanted to play. I attached the earring as I stood and looked at my reflection in the mirror. Then I scooped up the ferret and we dropped her into my, hang on, I think she puts her in her backpack, I'm not sure. She dropped her she did put her in a sack. Okay. She puts her in her knapsack sack. Baby sprawled into a long stretch. "You're ready?" I asked. "Let's go." One of the perks of living in Florida was the general lack of supervision. My grandmother was mostly in charge back then and quite liberal when it came to childhood freedom. As long as my sister and I periodically checked in and promised not to go more than 2 blocks away from the house, we were basically left to do our own devices. As the weekend my grandmother turned into my months, As the weekend at my grandmother's turned into months, I returned to familiar ways of dealing with my internal pressure. I stole money from the collection trays in the church. God. Oh, my Lord. I threw roadkill into the yard of a nasty lady who lived down the street. I broke into a vacant house a few blocks away, and I spent my free time there, soaking up the quiet. Jesus, she is bad, but she's funny. I loved it, that house. Whenever I'd stepped inside, I was instantly at ease. The blankness of the space just matched the way I felt, and I liked the equilibrium. I also liked, although it was empty, the house seemed full. I'd sit for hours alone in that frantic stillness. The lack of feeling, which normally stressed me out, had the opposite effect in that vacant house. In a weird way, it reminded me of the Gravitron, the perennial county fair favorite. It's speeding ride that offers no seat, has no seat belt, and even, has no seat belt or seats. Okay, I don't know what the Gravitron is. I mean, is that thing that sucks you against the walls that spins around? I think that's what it is. I'm not sure. Anyway, I used to love it. Over and over again, I'd spin, confounded by the machine's operator who sat in the control booth in the center of the wheel. Oh, I think that is what that is. Okay. Once I asked my mother, why doesn't he get dizzy? Because he's in the exact center, she explained. He's not affected by the spinning. That's how I felt when I went into the house. Intellectually, I knew I was, breaking some adult code and that my knowledge had made the operator in the center of the ride. She was like the operator in the center of the ride. All around me in this house was pulsing, aghast of having been violated. Yet I was calm and centered, at peace and in control. I'd free Baby from her knapsack, and so she could just roam around and then into the sunroom and just read my books. It was a bliss. Of course, I knew I wasn't supposed to go in the houses that weren't mine. And then I needed to tell my mom about it. After all, I wanted to be honest. I wanted to be safe. But anytime I tried to confess, she seemed so upset. There was never a good time to talk to my mom in Florida. Lately, it seemed like she wanted to avoid me. She refused to discuss anything remotely uncomfortable. And I mean obvious things, like the fact that we were absolutely, positively not living with Dad in San Francisco, and we were apparently never going back. Even after she finally found a place for us to live, a small townhouse next to the beach, Mom still refused to say anything specific about her long-term plans. That's sad. Mom, why are we going to new school? I asked. And she maneuvered into the car through a carpool line of strangers a few months after we'd moved into the townhouse. I don't know, she said. I just figured it might be more fun than sitting at home all day while Dad and I try to figure things out. Well, who's going to take care of baby? I asked, already missing my ferret. She's going to be so bored without me. I'll make sure she gets lots of attention while you're gone. Mom promised. In the meantime, maybe you could make some new friends. New friends, I said. I didn't have any old friends. Well, Mom replied hopefully, maybe this time will be better. Oh, that's sad. Only it wasn't. School might have been new, but I was the same. The other kids were nice enough, but right away, I knew they sensed I was different. I just granted my behavior tells weren't exactly suitable. Oh boy. Have you ever French kissed? A kid named Ryan wanted to know. We were eating lunch in the cafeteria about a month after Mom enrolled us in our new school. No, I said. Why not? Ryan pressed. Because my mom... Oh my God. She's just funny. Oh, wow. The second I said it, I started laughing. The response didn't even make sense. I don't recall why I said that, only that I was positive it would end the conversation. And it did, along with any chance of flying beneath the radar. Ryan's expression, along with those of the rest of the kids at that table, quickly changed. They all gave me the same look. I'd seen it before. Aw. Word of my mother's demise soon spread to the principal, who called me to her office. Patrick, she said, sitting too close to me on her couch. I heard your mother has passed away. Is this true, honey? Her face was full of concern. She goes, No, I said, eager to put her mind at ease. She's not dead. Oh, she replied, furrowing her brow. Well, why did you say she was dead? I didn't have no answer. It was such a stupid lie, and it was just uncharacteristic of me. I knew that it was a mistake, just as I knew it would probably result in a great deal of unwanted attention. But I did it anyway. I would go so far as to say I didn't even care about the repercussions. I just knew they wouldn't bother me. Even then, I understood there was a difference. Well, we were all talking about the worst thing that could ever happen. I lied. So that's what I said. My mother dying would be the worst thing. So she lied about that too. Now listen, they weren't talking about that at all. Oh my God. The principal nodded solemnly and mustered a smile. Well, that makes more sense, she says. You and your sister seem like such sweet girls. Principal does not really know her, does she? She was half right. Harlow was a sweet girl. Although we'd only been in the school for a few weeks, my sister was already thriving. She'd been on several play dates and was easily the most popular girl in her class. People were naturally drawn to Harlow. She was like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, picking up new buddies wherever she went. But I was like the blonde pharaoh-toting Wednesday Addams, leisurely repelling everyone in my path. See how she's funny. Okay. Occasionally, I tried to fit in, just to seem normal, to act normal like the other kids. Only it never lasted. For one thing, my exposure to conventional behavior and reactions was limited to my immediate family, so I could only fake it for so long. But more importantly, I didn't have anyone who could teach me. My struggles to conform felt like those of a kid in my class who had a hard time reading. He was great at things like math and music, but he had a learning disability that made it difficult for him to interpret letters. He'd been assigned a special instructor who worked with him until he had gotten better. Maybe that's what I'd have. I thought one day, a feeling, a disability. I thought of that men inside the prisons and wondered if they experienced something similar. It was though the full range of emotions was something everyone else just got. Some feelings came naturally to her, like she says, some feelings came naturally to me, like, oh, I don't know, like anger and happiness. But other emotions weren't so easy. Empathy and guilt, embarrassed or jealous, were like language I couldn't even speak or understand. Was there a special instructor who could help me? I knew the kids who needed extra help were supposed to go to their teacher, but it meant, but I couldn't do that. My fifth grade instructor, Miss Ravenel, was the meanest teacher in the school. So much of these misbehaving students were sent to her instead of the principal for punishment. And she had zero tolerance for kids who were different. Oh. Well, what do you want to do? She once demanded of a, okay, I'm going to use this word. Y'all all know I don't like it, but it's in the book. So here we go. Oh my God. Well, what do you want to do? She once demanded of a black second grader she'd been assigned to our classroom for talking too much. Oh boy, you want me to take you outside and hang you from a tree by your thumbs? Is that what you want? See, this is horrible. I mean, she's funny, and I like this writer, but some of the words and terms she uses are just kind of not my style, right? Not my cup of tea. Or I don't like that. But anyway, but she is a mean teacher, so she's talking about a mean teacher here. The little boy started to shake and cry. All the other kids in the class were laughing, but I was furious. Hang from a tree, I thought. For talking? Even though Miss Ravenel told us children like that needed to be taught a lesson. Children like that. Okay, listen, children like that. What do you mean children like that? I mean, that's ugly. I just don't like it. Anyway, it didn't make sense. I may have been missing an emotional connection to the concepts right and wrong, but I knew they existed. What this teacher was doing was wrong. She was hurting a kid using emotion. Worse, she was enjoying it. It's better to be like me, I thought. Maybe, except it was the first time I'd realized that fear couldn't be used against me. It wasn't that I wasn't immune to it, per se. I just that mine was muted. I understood this wasn't the case for most kids. While my classmates lived in constant terror of Miss Ravenel, I was never intimidated by her antics. While my cousins were afraid to leave the house after dark, I had no problem wandering around alone. And while my sister was quietly playing in our room after school, I was breaking into the nearby homes. Oh boy, I could have gotten caught. Sure. Was I worried about that? The consequences? No. I had decided fear must be a useless emotion. I pitied people who seemed to be afraid of everything. What a waste. I was just content to follow my own rules and live with empathy, and I saw no purpose in apprehension. But all that changed when I met the man with the kittens. Uh-oh, she must have gotten in trouble. I just found them, he said. Would you like one? It was late afternoon after school, and my sister and I were playing outside. Mom had decided to get her real estate license and was gone a lot in those days. A choice that didn't exactly align with her. We aren't here permanently, she says. Several days a week, she would send me and Aunt Harlow to my grandmother's after school so she could study, Typically, we spent our exile on the back patio, but that day we decided to pick flowers in the front yard. With no one paying attention, we could just take as many as we wanted, including buds from my grandmother's house. Oh, her rose bushes. To pick in the rose bushes, which we weren't supposed to touch, I bet. What color are they? I asked. Well, what color do you like? It seemed just generally friendly. And she goes, black. I said, definitely. I always wanted a black cat, and baby would too. I imagined that the three of us having a blast inside that vacant house. My ferret and my cat playing happily in the yard while I just lounged in the sunroom just watching. The man asked Carlo, and what color would you like? She grabbed my hand and wouldn't let me. She grabs my hand and wouldn't look at him, pulling me gently back toward the house. Oh, you don't have to be afraid of me, sweetheart, he said to her. Besides, he said, returning his attention to me, It just so happens that I have 2 black kittens, one for each of you. They're just around the corner. You want to come take a look? Now, this is terrible right here. Okay. Sure, I said without hesitation because, she has no fear, but Harlow is extremely afraid. All right. But Harlow wasn't having it. She tightened her grip on my hand and started walking backwards. No, she said quietly. No. No? Was she crazy? This man was offering 2 black kittens for free, and she wasn't going to go take them up on it? I knew why she was scared, but that wasn't any issue. I pulled my fingers from her vice grip and gave her a kiss on the forehead. I'll be right back. Oh my God, she's going with him. No, Harlow said again, except I wasn't listening. Off I went to follow the man as he led me down the street and toward the intersection. They're just over here, to the left, he said. I glanced at my sister as I rounded the corner. She was standing in the middle of the street now, her face full of fear. Why is she so afraid, I wondered. The question nagged at me. I turned back to look at Harlow again, but could no longer see her. We were now on a different street, the one with a house where I like to hide. I saw a van parked in the driveway. The van waved at me to follow him as he walked toward it. He's going to kidnap her, I think. I'm not sure. I did not read ahead, so I don't really know. Okay. That's my van, he said, in front of our house. That's when it clicked. I knew nobody lived in that house. That was an empty house. He was lying, and I made a terrible mistake. I was in danger. The door to the van was open, and a woman sat in the back next to a cardboard box. Come look, she called me. They're so cute, but I didn't have to take another step to know there weren't any kittens inside that van. What I did have to do was make sure that this couple didn't know I wasn't on to them. Oh boy. It was too late to run. The man had walked back alongside me and was blocking any escape to the street. Instinctively, I learned I learned in my way lack of feeling, faking my friendliness expressions. I turned to him with a bright smile. Is this your wife? I asked. That's so sweet. She's keeping the kittens company so they don't be lonely. The man just tilted his head, unsure of what to think. I waved to her and whispered to him, what's her name? He was telling her not to trust me. I could see it was all over his face. He was giving me the look. But despite his instincts, he smiled again and just turned away from me. Anna, he called, will you scoot over so our new friend can get a look at those kittens? But I was already gone. I started to run the second the man turned his head. The angry sound of his voice as he yelled after me, eliminating any doubt of his true intentions. Fear, I learned that day, could be useful. Boy, at the top of the prison tower, I stared out the windows at the men gathered below. They stared back. Uncle Gilbert, I said, do sociopaths get afraid? He thought for a minute before responding. I'm sure they probably do, he said, but I don't think they feel the way we do. I was perplexed. Well, has anyone ever asked them? Uncle Gilbert pointed to the men in the yard and asked them. He replied. He offered a half chuckle. Not on my watch, he said. Why, you want to go down there and talk to them about their feelings? Yes, I said, raising from my chair. Could I do that now? Not a chance, my mom just chimed in. Why not? Because it's dangerous, she said. Besides, it's late and we have to get going. Mom smiled, just, changing the subject. Remember, it's Paul's birthday tomorrow, and we're taking him to the beach. We have to get up early, okay? They're going to make a picnic basket. How's that sound? It sounded boring. I like Paul, an airline pilot who had a crush on my mom, but I hated the beach. I hoped he wouldn't be there long. The last time we'd gone, a stranger had come up to me and exposed his... Oh, my God, I got to say it, guys. Okay, so he's talking about the last time they went to the beach, something gross happened. So she goes, but I hated the beach. I hoped it wouldn't be there long. The last time we'd gone, a stranger had come up to me and exposed his penis while everyone else was swimming. Remembering ice castles, I pretended to be blind and acted disoriented until I seemed genuinely disturbed and wandered away. Giving my mom a limp shrug, I shifted my gaze back to the man below and took one last look. What separates someone like me from someone like them, I wondered. Suddenly, I was desperate to find out. Oh boy, that's gonna be time. Okay, we've been on here an hour, so we're going back to chapter 4 tomorrow. Well, I'll read chapter 4 tomorrow. We'll do 4 and 5 tomorrow. This is a funny writer, I'm telling you. She's funny. But you know, I have a whole playlist of other mental health things that I found that were kind of interesting on YouTube. I think I'm going to go pull one of these up. So just hang on a second, okay? Get this. Is this YouTube? It is. Okay. All right, let's hang on. My playlist. Okay. That's not what I'm looking for. I got to go back to YouTube. Just hang in there for a second. I'm going to go to my little playlist and pull something up. All right, here we go. Is it right there? Your music, downloads. Let's see, where is it? Okay, we'll look at our downloads. Hang on a second, guys. You know, I don't remember where my little oh, is it over here? It might be. Hang on. Oh, here's my playlist. Hang on. Let me get this to load up. Okay. Let's see. It's called. It's the 27th. Hang on, guys. Hang on. Oh, Jesus. I gotta find that. Just a second. It's called, I have a little playlist that I named for this. Okay, here we go. It's over here in this one. So stop right there. Hang on just a second. I'm going to show this other thing that I found. Hang on, stop. All right. Texas teen. Now, there's another one. Okay, hang on, guys. There's another one. That's not her. That's Alexi. That's the wrong Alexi. Okay. Yeah, have you heard of a lady named Alexi Avila? She put the baby in the dumpster. So let's play this for a little while. This is kind of a short one. We'll just watch her get sentenced. This is Alexi Avila. I'm going to share the screen. Okay. All right. She also dumped her baby, and she's getting sentenced for it. And then when I started looking at all the children or all the teenagers who had actually done this, it was a little bit shocking. There's a lot of them actually. To the crime of abuse of a child, resulting in great bodily harm. I just wanted to talk about those for a second because it's just horrific. But we don't know why they do it. We don't know if these children are throwing away their babies from some psychological disorder. In the Department of Corrections with credit for time served. Here she got. You have 475 days pre-sentence confinement credit. While in the Department of Corrections, you will participate in complete course of cognitive behavior therapy, which will deal with some of your psychological problems. You'll complete a course on parenting skills, and you will participate in any vocational training or college classes during that period of time. I impose a mandatory $5 domestic violence treatment fee, $75 Crime Victims Reparation Act fee, $100 DNA fee. I do find that this is a serious violent offense, which means that your day's credit, the most you could get for good time would be 4 days per month. I based that upon finding that this was a heinous crime. To toss one's own child into a dumpster like trash is something that it is an unforgivable event by any mother. Your child, I do agree, was very vulnerable, but for the grace of God and the happenstance of the 3 dumpster divers that found your child, we certainly would be here sentence you on a murder case as opposed to where you are. It's a miracle that in the cold weather of that night that your child survived. Oh, this baby survived. That's better. That leaving the child. I think I remember this case. In the dumpster and having hours to think about what you did indicates that it was a crime that you had an opportunity to correct after you thought about what you had done, but you did nothing.
The resulting harm to your child, yes, I agree. There was a high probability of death, almost certain death.
Lexus the villain.
The impact that we heard throughout the trial about the problems with breathing, the problems with your child's organs, these are serious, serious things. And but for the wonders of modern medicine, your child would be dead. And that's not to mention the psychological effect that this has undoubtedly given a situation where your child's going to have to deal with it for the rest of his life. When thinking about your case, I think over and over again of the fact that there's no doubt that we'd be looking at a murder case.
I'll credit the court TV.
But for luck. So you're very fortunate that those dumpster divers came along. There's no question that but for them, your child, who was thrown alive in the middle of a cold afternoon, would be out at the Hobbs landfill dead. And you just cannot get away from that. The court can't black that out, neither can you.
Mm-mm.
I do find that there are some mitigating factors, and that's why I knocked off 2 of the years. I do think your age is important. You had just turned 18. There's plenty of scientific studies that indicate a child 17, 18 years old, although you're legally an adult, that your mind is still not fully developed at that time. A lot of people do crazy things when they're a young person, but this went beyond the pale. But I do think your age is a significant thing. Secondly, the evidence was uncontradicted that you were suffering from bipolar disorder. That came from Dr. Kaye's testimony. It's in the reports that have been provided to me. Undiagnosed mental illness is probably a leading cause of people committing criminal acts. It was this court that sent you to the guidance center. It appears that counseling and the medication that you're on has been of some benefit to you, but I do find that someone who's dealing with mental illness is no different from someone dealing with physical illness, and you had it untreated at that time. And I do find that that was a mitigating factor. I also find that you had no prior record. Anyone that's been in my courtroom for the last 15 years knows that I always look at prior record. Is this someone that has been over and over again in front of a judge, given multiple opportunities? I think it's of significance that you had no prior record. I also find that it was to your benefit that you complied with every aspect of conditions of release, which indicated to me that you're probably, as I believe, not a threat to other individuals at this time, and that you're willing to comply with those things asked of you. Finally, and this is probably the cruelest of all mitigating factors, and it's been mentioned in the presentation here this morning, and that is you've given yourself a life sentence. You've given yourself a life sentence of knowing what you did with your child. And you've also given your son that same life sentence. And that is probably something that is as hard to deal with as any length of time that you may have in prison. Also, as part of your sentence, you are to continue on the medications or whatever medications are prescribed by your doctors while in the Department of Corrections. The request that if there's some kind of security issue that comes up, I assume that the Department of Corrections would deal with that, but I don't know that there's a whole lot that I can do in that regard. But if there is any kind of threat to you, I would ask that you be appropriately moved.
Well, that's good.
He's
concerned about her
section,
age and going to jail for dumping her baby.
3118 15.1 gives the court discretion if there are mitigating factors, and that's what I used in reducing your sentence by the 2 years. The serious violent offense was under 33-234. You'll be remanded into the custody of and to be transported to the Department of Corrections. Anything I missed from the state?
Your Honor, the crime victims reparation fee for felonies, I did not have that in my notes, but I may have missed it in the court's announcement of sentence.
I thought I said the $75 crime victims reparation fee.
That was everything, Your Honor.
Yeah, okay. Oh, I am suspending the $15,000 fine. Anything I missed from the defense?
Your Honor, nothing the court missed. However, defense is asking if the court will grant appeal conditions of release on this matter.
It requires a motion and hearing, and that's not on the calendar today. And I would also, for purposes of today, looking at 15 years, the court would have to see some
I don't
real
feel sorry for
compelling
her. She knew
evidence
better.
that there was
She knew
no
it was a live child.
possibility of flight. And the court will not, at this point in time, under the rule, which is,
I'm going to
I
shut that
believe,
down for you. I'll just tell you
4502,
something.
you've got to file a motion.
We'll call the motion.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you're all
What I'm going to do,
All right. Let me stop that sentencing. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what she did. I'm going to read you the story about what she did. Because you may not remember this one, but what's odd about this is in New Mexico as well. Because, Alexa Treviso is also in New Mexico court. Okay. On Monday, Alexis Avila learned that she will spend the next 16 years of her life in prison. She was found guilty of throwing her newborn son into a dumpster in January of 2022. Okay, so this was over on May 1st of 2023. The sentence came down from Judge William Shoebridge after a jury convicted her of attempted first-degree murder and child abuse causing great bodily harm to her 2-year-old. Shoebridge had closing arguments on Monday. The state argued that despite Avila's mental illness, okay, so they actually diagnosed her with a mental illness, the crime was intentional and violent. The state said Avila showed no remorse for her actions until she heard the guilty verdict. Your Honor, what we see here is a pattern of someone who is not only showing remorse, but someone who in fact takes deliberate steps in her own recollection of this event to minimize her own role. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Wait a minute. Your Honor, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Your Honor, what we see here is a pattern of someone who is not only showing, she's not showing any remorse, but that's not how it's typed, but someone who in fact takes deliberate steps in her own recollection of this event to minimize her own role. Attorney General Deputy of Prosecution Mark Probesco says, it's something that manifests and clear in the video, which was that she was attempting to kill the most innocent life, the most helpless of her own child. The court also heard from the baby's father, Stephen Astanga, who spoke of his son's behalf. My son, my healthy, my loving and handsome little baby boy, he is never going to forget the things you did, Stephen Astanga said. But for that, I can say that my son will be somebody one day, no matter how much he has been through. Then it was a defense's turn. Okay, so now the defense is going to go in here and try to, I guess, say something nice. I don't know. Domingo Avila, the defendant's father, stated she was raised in a loving home and he hopes to one day be part of his grandson's life. I also pray very much that one day we get the chance to meet our grandson, baby Saul. Your Honor, I ask that you please have mercy on her soul, Domingo Avila says. Alexa Avila was the last person to speak. in court on Monday. Okay, during her statement, she actually made a statement, guys. During her statement, she cried while apologizing to her son and her family for her actions. And this is her actual statement right here. I regret that I deprived him of having a loving and caring family, she stated. Yes, he has his dad, and he also has his dad's family. But with my family and I, we love hard, and we love with everything in us. My nephews and my niece are everything to myself and my parents. Shoebridge announces that Villa's 16-year prison sentence will be followed by 2 years of probation. After the sentence was read, he told Avila no sentence she serves will be harder than the life she has created for herself. And that's true. That's absolutely true. Because she will never forget what she's done. This will never be forgiven. You know, it's pretty sad. But there's just so many of them out there that do this. It's crazy. I was shocked when I started looking at all these videos of these people who do these things. I couldn't believe it. You know, there's a little short video. I guess we'll show that one tomorrow. There's a little short video that I want to show tomorrow about why parents kill their own children. I've always been interested in why would a person do that? Of course, we know there's some kind of mental illness that happens. That's one of the reasons why. But I'm going to show that tomorrow. I want to talk about a little more about that tomorrow. So tomorrow I'm going to read chapters 4 and 5. The lady's funny. I mean, yeah, she may be doing bad things and she may be a diagnosed sociopath, but it sounds funny, the things that she's talking about. But I guess in real life, it's not funny. I mean, actually, it's not funny. Anyway, I'll talk to you tomorrow. I got to go. Bye, guys. See you later.